Have you ever replayed a conversation in your head for days, maybe weeks, wondering why something so small hit you so hard? Have you ever felt completely fine, then one word, one look, one silence, and suddenly you're back in a pain you thought you had already buried? Maybe you've tried everything. You've built distance between yourself and the people who hurt you. You've lowered your expectations. You've told yourself you don't care anymore. But the truth is, you still feel it. And no matter how hard you try to protect yourself, it finds a way back in. Here's what no one has the courage to tell you. The problem is not the people who hurt you. The problem lives somewhere you have refused to look. And until you look there, nothing will change. This video is about that place and what Carl Jung discovered inside it. You believe that what hurts you comes from out there, from the betrayal, from the words, from the abandonment you didn't see coming. But Jung saw something else entirely. He said the pain you feel in response to the external world is nothing more than a reflection of what has not yet been resolved in your internal world. What hurts you is not what they did. What hurts you is what their actions activated inside you, the old wound that has never been touched, the story you immediately begin to tell yourself the moment something goes wrong. Think about this. Two people receive the same criticism. One shrugs and moves on. The other is devastated for a week. Same words, completely different impact. Why? Because the words didn't create the wound. They found one that was already there. And this is the brutal truth. As long as you believe that other people are the source of your pain, you will remain entirely at their mercy. Your peace will depend on how they choose to treat you. You will never be free. So, where does the real pain come from? Jung had a name for it. He called it the unconscious, the vast, dark territory underneath everything you're aware of, the part that operates in complete silence and yet controls almost everything you do. He said something that should stop you in your tracks. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Every pattern you keep repeating, every relationship that ends the same way, every moment you self-sabotage right before something good, every explosion of anger that comes from nowhere, you've been calling that bad luck. You've been blaming other people, timing, the universe. But Jung is telling you that's you. That's your unconscious running a program you didn't consciously install, but have never stopped running. Jung called what lives in that darkness the shadow. Not evil, not something to be afraid of, just the parts of you that were rejected. When you were young, you learned what was acceptable, what was praised, what was punished, and slowly, quietly, you hid the rest. The anger that was called too much, the sadness that was called weakness, the need that was called clingy, the sensitivity that was called dramatic. You didn't destroy those parts. You can't. You just pushed them underground, locked them in a room and pretended the room didn't exist. But they didn't disappear. They showed up in the relationships you keep choosing that hurt you, in the anxiety that arrives when life is finally going well, in the self-destruction that appears at the edge of your best moments. You felt this. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That's not bad luck. That's the shadow, knocking on the door you've been pretending isn't there. And what do most people do when the shadow knocks? They fight it. They tighten. They control. I will not feel this. I am stronger than this. Or they run from it. They stay busy. They pick up their phone. They do anything to avoid staying still long enough to hear what's being said. And here is what Jung observed after decades with people in the deepest pain of their lives. None of it works. Because what you resist does not disappear. It persists. It grows. It waits. What you resist persists. Every year you spend running from it, it becomes more embedded. What was a wound at 20 becomes a character trait at 35. What started as a fear becomes the architecture of your entire life. You cannot outrun yourself, no matter how busy you stay, no matter how many walls you build. You bring yourself with you every single time. So what is the answer? Jung's answer was not comfortable. It was not a technique or a strategy. He said, you have to go into the feeling, into the wound, into the exact place you've been running from. He called this integration, not healing in the way people mean it today, as if the wound simply disappears. Integration means bringing what is in the dark into the light, not to fix it, not to eliminate it, but to see it, to understand it, to stop pretending it isn't part of you. Because here is what changes the moment you do that. The wound loses its power to ambush you. When something lives in the unconscious, it reacts before you can think. But the moment you bring it into consciousness, the moment you look at it and say, I see you, I know what you are, I know where you came from, it can no longer control you from the dark. It doesn't vanish, but it is no longer in charge. Jung never lied about what this costs. He said this path would require you to face things that are genuinely painful to face. Because to become whole, you first have to dismantle what is false. The defenses, the performance, the mask. What he called the persona. You built it for good reasons. At some point, it kept you safe. But when you forget it is a mask, when you start to believe the performance is who you are, you become the most fragile version of yourself. Every criticism feels catastrophic because it threatens the only thing keeping you intact. You need constant approval to feel real. You need constant validation to feel stable. And so the world has enormous power over you, not because you are weak, but because you have handed it the keys. What Jung called individuation is the process of taking those keys back, not by becoming cold, not by needing nobody, but by becoming whole, by integrating every part of yourself, the light and the shadow, the strength and the wound, into one conscious human being. And what does that actually feel like? Something new appears between the trigger and the reaction, a gap, even a half second where, instead of immediately reacting, you can ask, what is this really about? What old wound just got activated? That gap is everything. Without it, you are a puppet. With it, you are a person. And the gap grows with time. The more you integrate, the wider it becomes. The wider it becomes, the more choice you have. Real choice, grounded in self-awareness, is the only freedom that cannot be taken from you. The other thing that changes is how you see people. When you haven't done the work, you unconsciously project your shadow onto others. The person who triggers your fear of abandonment becomes the villain before they've done anything wrong. You are not seeing them. You are seeing your own wound reflected back. Jung called this projection, and he said it was at the root of most human conflict. Not evil, not incompatibility, projection. When you begin to withdraw your projections, when you stop externalizing your shadow, people become people. Not threats, not rescuers, just human beings with their own wounds, their own unconscious driving them. And from that clarity, real connection becomes possible for the first time. Jung spent his entire career pointing people toward one thing. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. Awakening is not a spiritual event. It is a psychological one. The slow, difficult, irreversible process of becoming conscious of yourself. And when that happens, when you have truly made that crossing, the world does not lose its ability to hurt you, but it loses the ability to destroy you. Because you are no longer reacting from a wound you can't see. You are responding from a self you finally know. This journey is lonely. Jung was honest about that. When you start to change at this depth, you outgrow certain spaces. Conversations feel hollow. Relationships built on shared avoidance feel suffocating. And there will be a pull to go back, to make yourself smaller again, to return to the container you've outgrown. But this distancing is not failure. It is maturation. You are not leaving because you are better. You are leaving because you no longer fit. And in time, this is the part that's impossible to believe until you've lived it. You find people who have also made the crossing. And those relationships have a quality nothing before them had. Not built on matching wounds, built on matching depths. You came here because something in you is tired. Tired of being hurt by the same things. Tired of reacting in the same ways. Tired of the gap between who you show the world and who actually lives underneath. The answer is not in a better relationship, not in a different environment, not in a version of the world that finally treats you right. It's in the only place you have never fully been willing to go. Inside, into the wound, into the shadow, into the parts of yourself that have been waiting, patiently, quietly, for you to stop running and finally come back. And when you do that, when you stop fighting yourself and start meeting yourself, you will understand something no one could have told you before you were ready. That the person underneath all the masks and the walls was never the threat. They were the answer. And nothing and nobody will ever have the same power over you again. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you finally came home.